Imagine dedicating your entire life in secret to creating something profoundly unique, pouring your deepest anxieties and terrifying visions onto paper, only to use your dying breath to beg your best friend to burn every single page. Every manuscript, every diary, every letter reduced to nothing but ash. If your best friend had actually listened to you, the modern world would have lost one of the greatest literary geniuses in human history. This is the story of a man whose very name became an adjective for the absurd, the oppressive, and the nightmarish. A man who felt like a stranger in his own family, his own city, and his own body. This is the story of Franz Kafka, the man who desperately wanted the world to forget that he ever wrote a single word. Born on July 3, 1883 in Prague, which was then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Franz Kafka was brought into a world that felt fundamentally alien to him from the very beginning. He was the eldest son of a middle-class Jewish family, but his home was anything but a sanctuary. Towering over his existence was his father, Hermann Kafka, a massive, successful businessman who possessed a dominating and tyrannical personality. Hermann was everything Franz was not. He was loud, practical, commanding, and profoundly unsympathetic to his son's sensitive and highly introspective nature. For Franz, his father was less of a parent and more of an absolute, terrifying authority figure, a living embodiment of an unforgiving universe. This relationship became the central, unhealing wound of Kafka's life. Years later, he would write a monumental 47-page letter to his father, pouring out his lifelong terror and his persistent feeling of absolute inadequacy. In it, he described himself as a frail, weak creature, constantly overshadowed by an unfathomable giant. He never actually delivered that letter. Yet, the shadow of Hermann Kafka would stretch across everything Franz ever wrote, ultimately morphing into the faceless judges, the unreachable authorities, and the incomprehensible laws that populate his dark universes. Despite his brilliant mind and his undeniable passion for literature, Kafka never believed he could survive as a writer. To please his family and secure a living, he studied law and eventually took a job at the Workers' Accident Insurance Institute. For years, he lived a grueling double life. By day, he was a diligent, mild-mannered bureaucrat evaluating horrific industrial accidents and dealing with the crushing, mindless machinery of corporate paperwork. He witnessed firsthand how massive institutions ground individuals down into mere numbers. By night, after returning to his noisy family apartment, he would wait for everyone to fall asleep. Only then, in the dead of the night, exhausted and plagued by insomnia, would he sit at his desk and write. He called his writing a form of prayer, a desperate attempt to exorcise the demons in his head, but he hated his day job, referring to it as the bread job that was slowly draining his soul. Yet, ironically, it was the soulless bureaucracy of the Insurance Institute that provided the exact fuel for his most famous works. He began to write stories that captured the anxiety of the modern age better than anyone else alive. Perhaps the most famous of these nightmarish visions is The Metamorphosis. The story begins with what is arguably the most famous opening line in modern literature. As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a gigantic insect. It is a bizarre, deeply unsettling premise. A hardworking traveling salesman, the sole provider for his family, wakes up to find he is a giant bug. But the true horror of the metamorphosis is not the physical transformation itself. The true horror is how everyone reacts to it. Gregor's immediate concern is not that he is a monstrous insect, but rather that he is going to be late for work. His family, initially horrified, eventually views him as a disgusting burden. They strip his room of furniture, ignore him, and ultimately wait for him to die so they can move on with their lives. It is a devastating metaphor for alienation, for the transactional nature of family love, and for the deep-seated fear Kafka held that if he could no longer be useful, he would be discarded like vermin. But Kafka did not stop at the family unit. He aimed his pen at the very structure of society. In his masterpiece, The Trial, we follow Joseph K., a bank cashier who is unexpectedly arrested on the morning of his 30th birthday by unidentified agents from an unspecified agency for a crime that is never revealed to him. Joseph spends the entire novel trying to navigate a labyrinthine, absurd legal system, trying to prove his innocence without ever knowing what he is guilty of. The courts are located in dusty attics. The officials are corrupt and irrational. The more Joseph fights the system, the more entangled and doomed he becomes. He is fighting a shadow. This specific feeling, the sensation of being trapped in an illogical, oppressive nightmare where the rules keep changing and no one is willing to help you, became so universally recognized that we had to invent a new word for it: Kafkaesque. Whenever you are trapped on a phone call with an automated customer service loop or denied a permit because you lack a form that you cannot get without the permit itself, you are living in Kafka's world. Despite possessing this profound psychological insight, Kafka's internal life was defined by crippling self-doubt. He suffered from what we would now call extreme imposter syndrome. He believed his writing was terrible, a series of failed experiments that did not deserve to see the light of day. During his lifetime, he published only a tiny fraction of his work. A few short stories here and there, often pushed into print by his fiercely supportive best friend, Max Brod. Brod was a successful writer at the time, much more famous than Kafka, and he recognized his friend's absolute genius. Brod constantly encouraged Kafka, acting as his literary champion, his confidant, and his emotional anchor. Kafka's personal life was as complicated as his novels. He was deeply afraid of intimacy, fearing that marriage and family life would destroy his ability to write. He was engaged to a woman named Felice Bauer twice and broke it off both times. He had a passionate, intellectually intense relationship with the married translator Milena Jasenska, mostly through letters. It wasn't until the very end of his life, when he met a young woman named Dora Diamant, that he finally managed to break away from Prague, moving to Berlin to live with her. For a brief, fleeting moment, he seemed to find a sliver of peace. But time had run out. In 1917, Kafka had been diagnosed with tuberculosis. At the time, there was no cure, and the disease slowly and agonizingly consumed him over 7 years. By 1924, his condition had deteriorated catastrophically. The tuberculosis had spread to his larynx, making it so incredibly painful to swallow that he essentially starved to death. He spent his final days in a sanatorium near Vienna, communicating with Dora and his doctors mostly through written notes. Knowing that the end was near, Kafka made a final, shocking request to his closest friend. He wrote 2 notes to Max Brod. In them, he gave a very clear, unambiguous instruction. Dearest Max, my last request. Everything I leave behind me in the way of diaries, manuscripts, letters, my own and others, sketches, and so on is to be burned completely and unread. Kafka died on June 3, 1924, exactly 1 month before his 41st birthday. He left this world believing he was a failure. He believed his name would be forgotten, his anxieties buried, his nightmarish visions erased from the earth forever. He had given his final command, but he had given it to the one man he should have known would disobey him. Max Brod was faced with an impossible moral dilemma. On one hand, he had the dying wish of his absolute best friend, a sacred trust. On the other hand, he held in his possession some of the greatest works of literature the 20th century would ever see. Brod knew that Kafka's profound insecurities clouded his judgment. He knew that the world needed to read these words. Choosing literary salvation over his friend's dying plea, Max Brod betrayed Franz Kafka. He gathered up the scattered unfinished manuscripts of The Trial, The Castle, and America. He edited them, organized them, and relentlessly pushed to get them published. The rest is history. Kafka did not disappear into the void. Instead, his work slowly but surely conquered the globe. His writing spoke directly to the existential dread of the 20th century, predicting the rise of totalitarian regimes, the crushing weight of modern bureaucracy, and the deep, isolating loneliness of the human condition. The man who felt he was nothing, the man who wanted to be reduced to ashes, inadvertently became the defining voice of the modern era. There is a profound, almost tragic irony in Franz Kafka's legacy. He spent his entire life writing about individuals who are crushed by massive, unyielding systems and forces beyond their control. Yet, in the end, his own legacy survived the ultimate system of erasure simply because one individual, his best friend, decided to break the rules. Kafka wanted the world to forget everything he wrote. But the world, it turns out, will never be able to forget Franz Kafka. If this journey into the past has captivated you, don't forget to leave a like. It's the best way to support this project and help keep history alive. To continue uncovering the mysteries of the most fascinating figures who have ever walked this earth, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. That way, you won't miss our next journey through time. Until next time.